This video is on the topic of panic attacks and how to manage a panic episode. For a more fuller understanding of anxiety and its causes and management in general, please see my video on what is anxiety and management of anxiety. You will also need to see my video on diaphragm breathing, as that is a vital part of managing panic attacks, which we will now discuss. Panic attacks can be very disabling. A full-blown panic attack can feel like you're having a heart attack. It can feel like your life is being threatened, that there is some danger. And it causes many people to go to the emergency department the first time because of the extent of the feelings and the tightness in the chest and the pain that can come with it. Panic attacks can actually become a disorder in themselves, in that there may have been an initial trigger of anxiety, but that now the fear is of having a panic attack itself. So often the trigger is no longer as in the person's awareness, but just the pure fear of having a panic attack, especially in public, as it is obviously very embarrassing and even humiliating. So many people are rushing out of shopping centres due to an impending feeling of panic and trying to calm themselves in their car. So what is a panic attack? A panic attack is a peak experience of the fight and flight response. So the fight and flight response is our survival mechanism, but it's predominantly a physical survival mechanism from our prehistoric times, where we were hunter-gatherers and dealing with wild animals and facing them just with clubs and bows and arrows or whatever. So the feeling is of great fear and danger because you are out and about with wild animals. So hence a panic attack has an expectation that something bad is going to happen, because that's what the fight and flight response is wired to do, to come in times of physical threat. The problem now is that many of the threats are emotional. So the symptoms of panic attacks are the body's readiness for fighting a wild animal or taking flight. So it's basically around raising oxygen levels and delivering it to the body. So what happens in these situations? You have the big adrenaline rush because there's an alarm, an alert system triggered by fear that there's a big danger. Your pupils dilate to let more light in so you can see the threat better, and your focus narrows onto the threat so that you can track it and be aware of what's going on, and therefore it increases the effort of your concentration and focus. Not great if you're stressed on a computer at work. While this is happening, the heart is already starting to raise its rate, blood pressure is raising, your breathing has already increased through the chest and the hyperventilation to raise the oxygen. Blood is coming out of your skin and gut in areas that do not need it for this immediate action, and the blood is being shunted to the arms and legs. If you breathe too much, you can get dizzy in a panic attack. Hence the old idea of breathing into the paper bag in the movies. What we'll talk about here today is breathing with your diaphragm and changing your pace of breathing. So panic attacks are around physical survival. Most of the triggers now are on emotional survival and threats to our self-esteem, to how people think about us, to getting our needs met. So this can turn up being anxious running late. We can be anxious doing tasks at work, speaking up in meetings. We can be anxious in our relationships and fear of rejection. So we can have anxiety for many reasons. But when it comes to just a simple panic, it tends to occur in two ways. There is a definite trigger where you know you need to confront something. So for a person who has trouble leaving home, it may be needing to leave home. For a person with social anxiety, maybe thinking and having to go out for an event. It's particularly with an unknown event coming up. Or the phone can ring and a person can have a bit of panic because they're not capable of talking to people. Might be debt collectors on the phone. So it's common to experience panic where it's the palpitations of the heart and the sweating and maybe a bit of upper chest breathing, even with a little bit of dizziness. A full-blown panic attack, there is a massive rush of adrenaline, could be heat and tingling. There is a thumping of the chest, so it's going to jump out of your chest. There is massive hyperventilation occurring. There's a sense of doom and a real inability to cope with the situation. Now that you know what these feelings are about, you can start addressing them. You may not know what the trigger is yet, and that is where counselling comes in, or just personal reflection, which will be discussed in other videos as outlined in my anxiety management video. But in a panic attack, the first thing to do is just name it, that you're having a panic attack. Say that to yourself, I'm having a panic attack. Nothing bad is actually happening, assuming this is just an emotional threat, not a physical threat. So nothing bad is happening, it's just the dread feeling from a fight and flight response, and realize what is occurring. Then start to deal with the whole situation, predominantly through using your diaphragm breathing. So watch the video to learn this very effective technique. Now when it comes to diaphragm breathing, it's incredibly hard to do diaphragm breathing in the middle of a panic. So that will come in later as you learn control. The first thing to do is make sure your out breath is at least as long as your in breath, if not longer. So why is this? People in panic tend to breathe in more than they breathe out, and therefore they hold air in their lungs to the point that after a few breaths they've completely filled their lungs, aren't breathing out anymore, but can't breathe in any further because the lungs are full. Then they have a feeling that they can't breathe. Now, of course you can't breathe when you've already completely filled your lungs through hyperinflation. So how does this look like? If I exaggerate it, it looks like this, and I'll slow it down. You breathe in quickly with a fast intake of breath and you only breathe out a little bit. Then you breathe in quickly again, and I've taken 2 breaths and my lungs are full. So if I try and breathe in again, it's like I can't breathe. Now the simple answer is breathe out. So if you find you can't breathe, your breath holding, remind yourself to breathe out. If you're not in that situation and you're just hyperventilating, you have to make sure you breathe out as long as you breathe in. Breathing in is a panic, breathing out is relaxation, and you always breathe longer on the in-breath. So it doesn't matter if you count it or not, just keep trying to elongate your out breath. Some people say breathe in by count of 3, breathe out by count of 3. Again, if you make it systematic, you take yourself away from focusing on the fear and just focus on your breathing. So count it in. 1, 2, 3 in, 1, 2, 3, even 4, 5 out. So the first thing is breathe out for at least as long, if not longer, than you breathe in. The next thing will be slow your breathing down. So gradually slow it down, deliberately, physically. Then when you're getting some control, try and shift your breathing from your chest down to your abdomen, where your diaphragm is working in a relaxed fashion. As you'll see in the video on diaphragm relaxation breathing, that is linked to physiological relaxation. So as you slowly control your breathing with initially the longer out breath, slowing the rate and shifting it from chest to diaphragm breathing, you'll find the rest of your physiology is also settling down. It can feel shaky and quite overwhelmed afterwards. Have a drink of water, lie down, do what you need to do. But once you've settled down, find a time to reflect and go, what went through your mind? Often a panic attack is about a specific event that you know about, but it can occur at times when you're quiet and undistracted, often when there's no one home, or often when you're just going to bed. That time when there's no noise, no people, no distractions, and you're quietening down in your own mind, and the panic takes the opportunity to come up and rise. That can also mean that during the day your mind's pretty busy and keeping some of that panic under control, or some of that anxiety. So that's the management of panic attacks. Name it, control your breathing through breathing out longer, slow the rate, move it from chest to diaphragm. In the meantime, if you can, relax your muscles, relax your shoulders, try and relax the tension in your face, and not panic about the physical symptoms unless you genuinely think you're having a heart attack. But most people with chronic anxiety have recognized the cycle. So the first time, beware, don't assume what it is, but after that, most people recognize a panic attack for what it is. Now, there are people with deep-seated anxieties where they have a panic disorder or almost a social phobia where panic is very hard to control. And that's definitely a time to go and get help, maybe initially through a GP, to some form of mental health practitioner. The aim here for panic is managing the symptoms. If you aim for complete eradication, you often don't focus on management properly. And in many ways you can take the same advice for milder forms of panic where there's some thumping of the heart, bit of hand sweating, maybe a small degree of hyperventilation. Just become more self-aware, monitor your hands, your breathing, your heart rate, and just learn to feel the signs of panic. And the earlier you get in with these techniques, the more chance you've got of catching a panic attack. So monitor your signs earlier, start the techniques earlier, and with practice you'll find that either panic attacks will reduce in intensity, they won't go so far, or they'll start to reduce in frequency, they're not being triggered as often. And these are very good signs of management. Quite often they start to reduce in intensity before frequency, but don't judge this process, just realise that you're starting to get control over your body, yourself and your life. So please see my other videos on what is anxiety and anxiety management, cognitive behavioural therapy to manage your thinking, and diaphragm breathing is vital to manage panic. Good luck.